The photos came back blurry. Not unusual. Cheap trail cams often caught wind-shaken branches or deer that moved too fast. But something about these photos made my stomach twist. It was my face in the frame, standing in the middle of the woods, staring directly at the camera. Except I had never been there. It started a few days before, when I went up to the old family cabin alone. My uncle left it to me when he passed. Deep in the northern woods, isolated and always strangely untouched by time. The kind of place where clocks tick louder than usual, and mirrors don't feel like they reflect you quite right. I set up trail cams around the property like I always did. 3 in total. 1 facing the backwoods, 1 by the narrow game trail, and 1 about 50 yards from the cabin itself, facing a patch of clearing where animals like to graze at dusk. Nothing strange the first night. I hunted, cooked, I read by the fire, but I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Not paranoia, something deeper, primal, like the trees had eyes. The second night I checked the cameras. Mostly empty frames and a blurry raccoon. But then the clearing cam showed me. Not just once. In 3 consecutive frames, time-stamped just past midnight, I stood in the clearing. Hands at my sides. Blank expression. No rifle. No gear. Just me in the same flannel I had packed, but hadn't worn. I laughed it off. Thought maybe someone had broken into the cabin, grabbed my clothes, and messed with me. Still, I checked the locks. Everything was untouched. That night, I wore the flannel shirt just to prove a point to myself. But at 12:11 a.m., I woke to the distinct click of the trail cam shutter. 3 quick flashes, spaced out. Exactly like before. I didn't go outside. I couldn't move. My body was frozen in a strange panic, like something ancient inside me knew to stay still. In the morning, I reviewed the card again. There I was, same spot in the clearing, wearing the flannel I now had on. But my face was different. Not just blank this time, grinning, wide, unsettling, like it was trying too hard to imitate joy. I stared at the image, pulse hammering in my neck. The copy of me had dirt on its knees. His hands were stained, fingers long, almost too long. And in the last photo, just before the camera shut off, the thing lifted its hand and waved. I didn't sleep that night. Locked every door, every window. Sat in the corner with my rifle and flashlight, watching the trees through the glass. At 3:27 a.m., I heard footsteps, crunching slowly across the gravel outside the cabin. They stopped right in front of the door. No knock, no sound. Then the doorknob turned once, then again. Locked. The thing didn't try to force it, just stood there. Eventually, the footsteps moved away. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink for what felt like hours. Next morning, I found prints outside. Bare feet. No shoes. Just like in the photo. Leading from the woods to the cabin and back. I yanked the memory card from the trail cam and left. Didn't pack. Didn't even shut the cabin door behind me. Back in town, I plugged the card into my laptop. The new images were worse. The copy of me wasn't standing anymore. It was crawling on all fours, neck twisted at a painful angle, eyes staring straight into the lens. And in the final frame, taken just before dawn, it was standing inside the cabin, peeking through the window. My window. The timestamp was 4:06 a.m. I was inside at that time, alone, or so I thought. I deleted the photos, burned the card, sold the cabin, but I still see my face sometimes, in reflections, in windows, and once on my phone, an airdropped photo appeared in my gallery. Grainy, slightly tilted, me standing in the clearing, grinning, waiting. We weren't far off the main trail when I saw it. A sliver of a roofline, hidden behind a wall of pines, where no structure should have been. We'd been coming to this forest for over a decade. Hunted every trail, mapped every ridge. This cabin wasn't on any satellite image. No signs, no path, no footprint in the snow leading to it. It was Nate who first spotted the corner of the roof, dark with slanted at an unnatural angle. He pointed, eyebrows furrowed. "You see that?" I did, and I wish I hadn't. We pushed through the brush, rifles lowered. Every branch we passed seemed to resist us, clawing at our sleeves. The air grew still, thick, as if the forest was holding its breath. The cabin was small, almost sunken into the earth, like it had grown from the soil itself. Moss clung to the roof like a scalp. The wooden boards were warped but intact, too intact for how deep into the wilderness we were.
No chimney.
No glass in the windows, but there was a door, and it was wide open. Nate muttered, "Squatter's place," but there were no signs of life.
No trash. No gear.
Just an empty threshold yawning like a mouth. He stayed back. I stepped in. The floor creaked, but not under my feet. More like it breathed with me. Inside, the smell was heavy. Not rot, but old wood, wet earth, something else. It was a single room, unfurnished except for a chair placed dead center beneath a hanging light bulb that wasn't connected to anything.
No wires.
No power. Just a bulb hanging from the ceiling. And it was on. I turned to ask Nate if he saw it too, but he was gone. The doorway I'd walked through was now a wall. I stood still, the chair just a few feet away. The bulb flickered. Then I heard a click. Behind me, a Polaroid camera had taken a picture. But I hadn't brought a camera. Another click. This time closer. Something else was in the cabin. I turned too slowly. There was movement in the shadows. A figure. It wasn't shaped right. Too tall. Elongated arms. Head tilted at an angle that strained the neck. It held the Polaroid camera in one hand, dangling from fingers too long. Took another picture. This time of me. The photo dropped to the ground before its edges could finish developing. I saw myself, standing in the cabin, staring directly at the lens. But something was behind me in the image. Something I couldn't see when I turned. The bulb dimmed, then went out. Darkness. My breath felt like it had weight. I stepped backward, bumping into the chair. Then creaking wood. Something circled me. Couldn't see it, but I felt it. The way the air shifted, how the temperature dropped as it passed. A faint whisper brushed my ear. Not words, not a language, just the sound of something thinking. I lunged toward the wall where the door had been. It was solid but not stable. The wood moved beneath my hands like flesh. Then light again. Blinding white. The door was open, and Nate was there, rifle aimed, face pale. He pulled me out by my jacket. I hit the ground outside hard, coughing, lungs burning like I'd inhaled smoke. The cabin looked the same. Still, harmless. But in the window something watched. Not a person. It wore my face. We didn't speak until we were back at the truck. Nate said I had only been inside for less than a minute. He said he saw me walk in, and the door shut behind me instantly. He couldn't open it. Then suddenly, I stumbled out, gasping, covered in dirt and blood. But I hadn't been injured. Later, we tried to find the cabin again. It was gone. The clearing was still there, but nothing stood in it now. No foundation.
No debris.
Only the chair, still centered, still perfectly placed. And on the seat was the Polaroid. My face, smiling, but I don't remember smiling. We were 2 days into our hunting trip in the Bitterroot Mountains. No cell service, no towns for miles. Just trees, ridgelines, and the quiet that only untouched forest can offer. On the third morning, something strange happened. The The sky had just begun to lighten, soft oranges bleeding into the night as the first signs of sunrise approached. We packed our rifles and quietly stepped out of the tent. But then it happened. A second light bloomed over the opposite ridge. Not the sun, but something like it, round, golden, and far too close to be celestial. At first, we thought it might be a forest fire, but there was no smoke, just an orb of brilliant light rising slowly, deliberately, from the treeline. It wasn't the same as sunlight. The shadows it cast were longer, stretching toward the actual sun rather than away from it. And the forest responded. Every bird call stopped. Insects went silent. The air grew heavy, not with heat, but with pressure, like the moment before a thunderclap. Nate muttered, "That ain't the sun." We stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether to run or stay hidden. The orb continued to rise until it hovered above the ridge, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Then came the sound, low at first like wind, but it grew layered, rhythmic. Not wind, breathing, deep, deliberate breaths, echoing across the valley like they came from something vast and unseen. That's when we noticed the trees below it. They were moving, not swaying, not rustling, moving as if shifting on their own, rearranging, forming a spiral, a widening pattern on the forest floor below the light. It was no natural formation, and it wasn't random. We backed up, rifles tight in our grip, but nothing about a gun felt useful anymore. The woods had changed. No trails looked familiar. Landmarks we'd passed just yesterday were gone. The terrain felt like it had folded in on itself, like the forest was becoming something else entirely. We tried to retrace our steps but ended up circling back to the same clearing, now with scorch marks on the trees and strange, spiral etchings carved deep into the bark. The trees in that spot were warm to the touch. One of them vibrated when I laid my hand against it. Hours passed. The second sun hung above us, motionless now, while the real sun dipped lower, casting a sickly, orange haze across the land. That night we didn't sleep. Nate saw figures between the trees, too tall, their limbs bending backward, moving silently in the unnatural light. They didn't approach, but they watched. By morning, the second sun was gone. The world looked normal again. Almost. We finally found our trail, made it back to the edge of the forest. But the birds never returned. The insects stayed silent. And Nate wasn't the same. He stopped speaking during the hike back, eyes glazed, blinking slowly like he was seeing something far away. His skin had taken on a slight glow under the starlight, subtle but unmistakable. He wouldn't talk about what he saw when he left the tent that night. Just kept saying, "It showed me the roots." Weeks later, I checked satellite maps of the area. There was a massive burn mark across the ridge. Not caused by fire, not natural erosion. Just a darkened spiral, etched into the earth. No agency could explain it. No one even acknowledged it existed. But I know what we saw. There was a second sunrise. And nothing was the same after it rose. I had my scope trained on it for 10 full seconds. It was the biggest buck I'd ever seen. 8 points, massive body, antlers that looked like twisted tree branches in the mist. It stood perfectly still at the edge of the brush, like it had been waiting for me, almost like it wanted me to take the shot. I pulled the trigger. The crack echoed through the woods. Birds scattered. Silence fell. I saw it jerk and drop immediately, like it should. Perfect shot, center mass. No way it survived. I climbed down from my stand and headed toward where it fell, adrenaline still pulsing, thinking this would be the one I'd mount on my wall. But when I got there, the buck was gone. No blood trail, no drag marks, just a patch of disturbed leaves and hoof prints that ended abruptly, like it had been lifted off the ground. At first I thought maybe I missed, but that didn't make sense. I never miss at that range. I stood in the clearing, confused, turning in slow circles. Then I heard footsteps, heavy, rhythmic, not like hooves on dry leaves, but like bare feet. I turned. About 20 yards away, a tall figure stood half-hidden behind a pine tree. It had the body of a man, long limbs, narrow torso, but the head was a deer's. Antlers, snout, dark, glassy eyes locked straight on me. Its chest rose and fell, slow and steady. The strangest part? It didn't run. It didn't bolt like a wounded animal. It just stepped out from behind the tree and stood in full view. I should have raised my rifle again, but my hands wouldn't move. It wasn't fear. It was something else. Like my body knew this thing wasn't supposed to be hunted. The creature tilted its head slowly, like it was studying me. Then it stood up straighter. No longer hunched like a beast. Its posture shifted, unnatural, almost theatrical. Then it turned and walked into the woods, on two legs, not stumbling, not limping. It walked, like a man. I didn't follow it, couldn't. My legs carried me back to my truck faster than I could think. But before I left, I checked my trail cam, hoping it might have caught something. When I reviewed the footage that night, my stomach dropped. There it was, the buck, standing, watching the stand from a distance. Then the shot. The footage blurred for a second, just static and distortion. Then it reappeared, standing, still, like it had never been shot. It looked up directly at the trail cam and grinned. The mouth opened too wide, showing human teeth between split deer lips. And then, without warning, it stood upright and walked out of frame. I showed no one. I deleted the footage the next day, but it didn't help. Because something started leaving things near my cabin. Small things at first. Antler shavings on my doorstep. A pile of dead leaves arranged in a perfect spiral. Then one morning, I found hoofprints leading up to my bedroom window. But they weren't horizontal. They were vertical, like someone had walked up the wall. And they stopped at the glass. No prints leading away. Just a handprint. Not a paw. Not a hoof. A human hand. Pressed into the glass. Long fingers. Too many joints. The following night, I heard scraping on the roof. It circled slowly, methodically, as if it was tracing the perimeter. When I finally worked up the courage to open the front door and look, there were antlers. Fresh. Massive. Nailed to the porch beams with rusted railroad spikes. And in the dirt beneath them, my name, carved over and over again like some kind of mantra. The woods aren't the same anymore. I used to know every tree, every trail. Now they seem to move when I'm not looking. Sometimes, I hear branches cracking just behind me, but nothing's ever there. Other times, I find myself back at that same clearing where I shot it, no matter where I go. Like the forest is looping. Nate, my hunting buddy, didn't believe any of it. He called me paranoid and agreed to come out for one more trip, just to prove it was in my head. He never came back. I found his boots standing upright in the middle of the trail. Still laced, still warm, no tracks, no signs of struggle, just a long trail of blood leading off into the brush, and then stopping, clean, like it had been erased. The game warden asked questions but didn't press. He just looked at me, grim, and said, "Some things in the forest don't want to be found again." That night, I found something new hanging above my porch, a deer skull. But inside the sockets were human eyes. They blinked once before I could scream. The creek was always there, winding like a thin silver scar through the forest. It wasn't marked on maps, but every hunter in the county knew about it. It ran quiet even when swollen with rain, unnaturally quiet. No frost, no insects, no birdsong. Just water always moving. I set up camp half a mile from it on a solo hunting trip in early November. It was the kind of cold that clings to your bones, but I'd done this a dozen times. Tent, fire, rifle, routine. The first night was still. No wind, no forest noise. It wasn't peace, it was absence. By morning, my skin itched like I'd been watched all night. The deer tracks I followed led me to the creek. It looked normal enough. Shallow, clear, steady. But as I stood there, scanning the opposite bank, I thought I heard my name. Soft, drawn out, almost lost beneath the trickling of the water. Jason. I turned. No one. I told myself it was wind. A branch rubbing. A bird. Anything. But the sound was too clear. Not quite human, but shaped like a voice. I went back to camp early, unease sitting in my gut like stone. That night, the fire burned low and the silence pressed in. Then I heard it again, just beyond the edge of camp, near the tree line. Jason. Same tone, same awful softness, like it didn't come from lungs, but from the throat of the forest itself. I stood, shining my flashlight out, expecting to see a prankster, maybe a lost hiker. Nothing. I didn't sleep. By morning, I decided to cut the trip short. As I packed, I noticed something strange. My boot prints from the day before were gone. No rain, no snow, but the earth was smooth again, like someone had followed them and erased them. Against better judgment, I returned to the creek one last time. It was earlier than before, light still filtering through the branches. The whisper came again. Jason. But this time it was closer, directly across the water. I aimed my rifle on instinct. There was something there. A shape. Thin, tall, standing too still behind the trees. Who's there? I called out. It didn't move. Not at first. Then, without a sound, it slipped behind a tree. I waited. Nothing. But when I turned to leave, I heard the water, moving against the current. When I looked down, I saw the shape crawling through the creek. Fast. Almost gliding. Pale hands gripping rocks, but no sound. Its face turned upward and I saw, not eyes, just holes. Empty sockets with water pouring from them. Mouth open in a grin far too wide. Jason. The voice echoed from its throat, but its lips never moved. I ran. Branches tore at my arms, the woods blurring around me. When I reached camp, I didn't stop. I didn't pack. I just ran until I found the road. 3 days later, I returned with a sheriff and 2 locals. They found my gear, everything exactly where I'd left it, but something else too. Footprints. Dozens of them all around the creek. Bare, human-sized, but wrong. Too long. Toes pointed sideways, like they'd turned in on themselves. No one found any animal sign, not even a squirrel. And in one of the photos taken that day, barely visible in the trees, was a tall, thin shape, too dark to be shadow, too solid to be wind. His head was tilted, and the sheriff swore he heard something when he took the picture. A voice, soft like water slipping over stones, whispering the name, Jason.